Unit Story Number 31. Sealed Blaze Maiden Bavsargra. One cannot speak of the 2,500 years before the Chakrabarthi Divine Era without mentioning the dark times that enveloped Planet Cray. Referred to as the Godless Era in history books, the Prayerless Era to those of faith, and one more term, referring to the endlessly long period of time when the divine blessings and hope were lost, and the world was in turmoil and desolation. That is, the night without dawn. The light of dawn. Reno Lily's thin silk fluttered as she stood alone atop the snow-covered mountain, a high peak in the heavens, far from the world of man. The air was thin, her slender body was motionless against the bone-chilling winds, and there was no light in her eyes. Despair Peaks. These peaks, which were the highest point of Midwestern Dragon Empire's Neo-Dragonborn mountains, had been called as such by the people of this world for some time. It is said that the reason why this land, which was once a mountain range, was transformed into a cordillera, an extensive chain of mountain ranges, was because of the diastrophism that accompanied the great explosion that created the inland sea Gizeh-Endbay in the east long ago. The annihilation of the dragon deity of destruction shattered the frame of the earth, distorting the ground's surface like a wrinkle. As if being overwhelmed by the wind, a sound of feathers swirled around Reno Lily and enveloped her. There were 4 dragons. Our maiden, it is about time you got dressed. Sealed Blaze Dragon Halibadra stared at the girl with a rational gaze. Shirunga will soon reach the target. Sealed Blaze Dragon Namorkar wrapped around the girl, protecting her from the wind. Ulsalra will also be by your side. Sealed Blaze Dragon Ulsalra conveyed such thoughts as it guarded the rear with its huge body. Sealed Blaze Dragon Arinsa praised the girl with a roar. This was the faithful follower who would lend their back whenever she was Reno Lily. Got it. She put a black-winged crown upon her head, and then the wind stopped. The mountaintops were dyed with a black power. At its center was no longer the simple, lightly dressed girl Reno Lily. Instead, what appeared was a human with 4 wings on her back. Her body was wrapped in a dignified, dark blue robe befitting a priestess of the sealed blaze. The girl who had been standing atop the mountain now appeared to be so large that she covered the entire mountain in the eyes of the dragons lined up before her. This was because of the overwhelming energy and presence of the blue flame that was sealed within the depths of this shrine maiden. Lady Bavsargra. The dragons hover in the air around the peak, a step below the shrine maiden. As you may have already guessed, 5 villages and a town at the foot of the mountain have been destroyed, said Halibadra. The bandit attack, driven by despair, has resulted in the burning of the fields that were ready for the next summer harvest. It is likely that no one will survive the next winter, said Namorkar. On the other hand, the bandits perished through infighting. As such, both the attacked and the attackers were met with ruin. The despair of this world is truly deep. Ulsalra's thoughts were as gloomy as a eulogy. Though it is the work of man, it is still disheartening. Let us realize an ideal world without such suffering with our own hands. Sealed Blaze Maiden Bavsargra's voice was resolute and composed, but deep within it was chilling ice and sturdy steel that made those who listened tremble. And for some reason, it stirred up uneasiness, an unrest that could not help but shake the hearts of others. A dangerous sound that felt like one was looking into the crater of a volcano about to explode. There are 2 kinds of despair. When the have-nots realize that their suffering will never cease, continuing into the relentless infinity, and when you realize that something you once gained has been taken away and can never be recovered. Bavsargra had watched the dragons and people be crushed by despair for a long time since the godless era. In other words, the sealed Blaze Maiden Bavsargra understood the essence of despair deeper than anybody else. Despair was like an incurable disease. There was no one who was unafraid when faced with it, not one who was not overwhelmed by fear. Seldom were those who stood up against it. Those who had fallen into despair recognized it with their own eyes. Those who had lost the lives of their loved ones burned with vengeance, and gentle farmers who had lost their winter reserves became bandits. Same for merchants, a chain of hatred and loss. In this way, the walls of towns and villages grew higher, and the hearts of the people grew rougher. Bavsargra thought, even in the Chakrabarthi divine era, the despair that covered planet Krang ran deep, reaching every corner of the world. Hope and the likes that some people believe in was as feeble a lie as the light before the storm. The strength of the sealed Blaze Maiden and the sealed Blaze Dragons, to whom that power has been shared, is wielded in order to free the world from the depths of despair. If despair is something that cannot be eliminated, what blessings are granted to those who worship the sealed Blaze Dragons and myself? What was the ultimate salvation? The ultimate means of utilizing my power, which grows stronger the more the world is filled with despair? There was one answer, one conclusion that was clear. It could only be heard by the sealed Blaze Maiden Bavsargra, a faint call from the far west. In that next moment, a great sword appeared in her right hand and a large shield in her left. Before the surrounding sealed Blaze Dragons could react, it happened. Swayanba! Along with Bavsargra's cry, the sealed Blaze shield Swayanba forcefully pushed out. Even though the opponent before her could not be seen, this was a shield battle tactic, a thrusting motion that knocked back the enemy and broke their positioning. Next, the great sword on the right swung down as if giving a command to an army. Prithivi! Sealed Blaze Sword Prithivi's blow that slashed through the sky. As expected, it seemed to be aimed at someone who was invisible to the dragons. Fall back, Shirunga! When Bavsargra called out, sealed Blaze Dragon Shirunga's form appeared, as if it had pulled out from the emptiness, and was thrown along with what it was grasping in its claws onto the table-like rocky area. I'm sorry to have inconvenienced you, Lady Bavsargra. Formerly a well-known thief, the one-eyed sealed Blaze Dragon Shirunga felt so awfully ashamed as a retainer that they gave a bow. Between Shirunga, Bavsargra, and the other sealed Blaze Dragons lay the aforementioned load. It was a large egg. Thank you for your service. Bavsargra descended onto the rocky area with a flap of the wings on her back, the sword and shield dematerializing as she grabbed a hold of the large egg, inspecting the face within its crack. It seemed to be asleep. I finally got it. The Chakrabarthi dragon egg. I'll definitely get you to hatch as a seed of great power that will save the world from despair. Here, Bavsargra showed a thoughtful expression and looked at the sealed Blaze Dragon under her command. They will be quick to give chase. We must move at once. But Lady Bavsargra, there are still thousands of Ree between us, said Halibadra. Our opposition are the Blaze Maidens who look up to this as an object of worship. They will desperately pursue any clue they find. And that trickster should not be underestimated. We will get down to the ground immediately, heading south. Across to the border, to the Dark States. The sealed Blaze Dragons let out a gasp of surprise in unison. Oh, so we're finally extending our reach south of the Neo-Dragonborn, said Damorkar. The demon's country is also a land deeply sated in despair. I'm sure there are many who pray to us, stated Ulsalra. It was true that Dark States, with its swirling miasma, was a suitable location for the sealed Blaze Dragons who were trying to save the world from despair. Either way, if the dragons would follow the sealed Blaze Maiden to the ends of the world. O sealed Blaze Dragons, my brethren. The dragons again bowed their heads in unison. We have made the first move against the great false hope of the north. Now there are signs of disturbances in the west, a small light in the east, conflict in the southern pole, and a great power is awakening across the sea. Was across the sea referring to the Zugaya continent, where Stoicheia was located? It seemed that Bavsargra could sense the movement of forces involved in the balance of the world. Arise now, our journey is finally about to begin. A journey to free the world from suffering. Bavsargra raised the egg to the dark son of dawn, who had not been taught to her by anyone. The gesture was like that of an ancient ritual, full of majesty and awe that overwhelmed its surroundings. Then, the dragons let out a cry that resounded through the mountains. The mountains trembled, the fern and ice quickly ran down in an avalanche. The people of the towns and villages at the foot of the mountain, who had been staring dumbfoundedly at the burnt fields, were overcome by the battle cry of the sealed blaze and cowered in fear. This night will never dawn. Behold, the Temple of Dawn, its traditions coded in lies. Bavsargra gazed straight to the north at a spot in the Dragonia mountain range. At a distance beyond that of any animal's sight, only visible to her through thick clouds and haze, she could see the place she hated the most, the Red Dawn Manor. The Chakrabarthi egg is in my hand. The egg, Sunrise Egg, had its eyes closed without making the slightest movement. With the arms of the sealed blaze maiden Bavsargra, the girl who went by the name Rhino Lily as a human. Now, the late, dusky morning sun finally began to rise over the Dragonia continent, and in the sky over the Despair Peaks, there was a shadow looking down on the Shrine Maiden and the dragons from even higher up. It was a small figure floating in the sky, but it was like an ominous black cloud indicating an upcoming situation. Terminology notes. The Void and World Crises. The Void has existed in the universe even before the birth of Planet Cray, an entity containing infinite energy and all possibilities. Since the destruction deity Gizeh is known as an incarnation of Void, it is often seen as something that brings a world crisis to Planet Cray. In fact, it has been on the side of destroyers historically, but the Void itself is not evil. It is a force for harmony seeking, to return the single possibility to a state of various possibilities. Also, the people of Planet Cray are not completely helpless against the threat of the Void and its followers. With the welcoming of the Chakrabarthi Divine Era, an international research network has finally been established between Stoicheia, Brancate, and Keter Sanctuary to look back on the past and prepare for the world crises that are sure to occur in the future. If by chance Bavsargra's power to sense the movement of forces involved in the balance of the world becomes known, though it is supernatural, or rather, because it is, to the governments and the militaries of each nation, it is bound to be a battle for a golden egg for the researchers.